extremely excited to introduce this next session on feminism, activism, and rights for all. In this session, which we're hosting in partnership with Facebook, we're bringing together two leading activists for women's rights, trans rights, mental health, and positive body image. With 2020 turning the world upside down and giving us a chance to think about building back better, they'll explore what true progress looks like and how we as individuals, alongside the tech and business community, can create sustainable change. I'm delighted to introduce our wonderful moderator, Scarlett Curtis. Scarlett is the curator of It's Not Okay to Feel Blue and Other Lies, as well as the Sunday Times bestseller and National Book Award winning Feminists Don't Wear Pink and Other Lies, a collection of essays by 52 women on what feminism means to them. She's the co-founder of the Pink Protest, a feminist activist collective committed to helping young people take action online and in real life. To date, they've been part of campaigns that have changed two laws, a bill to end period poverty and a bill to get FGM into the Children's Act. Scarlett, I'm so thrilled to hand over to you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure, mostly because I am here to interview someone who I think is one of the best people in the world. And that's a fact. Jameela Jamil is a one-of-a-kind multi-hyphenate who works as an actress, writer, host, and advocate. Jameela was first seen on American television, starring as Tahani in Mike Schur's global Golden Globe-nominated series The Good Place, opposite Ted Danson and Kristen Bell. In 2020, Jameela will reprise her role as a host on the TBS game show The Misery Index. She will also voice a character in the upcoming Disney series Mira Royal Detective, with an all-Indian cast that includes Frida Pinto and Cal Penn. In addition, she's one of the judges on HBO Max's new competition show Legendary. She is an advocate for many causes and in 2018 launched a movement and activism platform called iWay. What started as an idea and an Instagram page became a platform and community of change makers who come together to share ideas, experiences, and ultimately mobilize activism. Through original content, editorial, and podcasts, the platform explores social issues that stem from mental health to climate change to the representation of marginalized groups. I think the interview is over now because that is such a long intro, but welcome, Jameela.
Bye everyone. Thanks for
coming. Bye. That was great. That was an hour long. I want to start at the very beginning because I think your journey into activism really exemplifies how powerful the internet and social media can be when all the right things come together. I think a lot of people don't know that you've been very involved in activism for much longer than your work with iWay. Can you tell us a bit about the work you were doing before iWay even began?
So I probably officially started in activism around the age of about 19. I just recovered in the first step of recovery from anorexia. And anorexia is a very, very tricky and nuanced disease, really, and condition that can take on so many different forms, but I stopped actively starving myself at 19 after having been hit by a car, lost the use of my entire back for about a year and a half. And it made me have this newfound respect for my body. And it was such a wake-up call to realize how much I had been disrespecting my body, how much I wasn't grateful for what it does, like how much I'd taken it for granted. And, I'd been actively starving myself from probably around the age of about 11 until 17. And harming myself irrevocably in the process. And I started to investigate, where did that instinct in me come from? I was such a happy, confident child who never thought about the way that I looked. In fact, I loved having a big tummy and I would do everything I could to try and make it bigger, push it out, make sure everyone noticed it. And suddenly, around the age of 11 years old, just as, I guess it was the kind of dawn of heroin chic, I was just swept up in the craze for women to be a size 0. And so at 19, looking back on that and realizing how much the fashion industry and Hollywood and all of these different media outlets had, how much responsibility they had, and how people like me and all of the girls in my school, I feel like, how damaged our relationships were with our bodies and with food. It had all come from that. So I started writing letters to the government, letters to newspapers. I ended up being published on page 2 of the Evening Standard. And then that meant that I started being invited onto various news channels. So there's news footage of me at like 19 years old going on like prime time, Channel 4 News, BBC News, talking about how much the industry needs to change. And so I guess I've just been consistently moving since then. I accidentally became famous at 22 and just decided to make sure that I only use my platform to raise awareness about the issues that no one used to listen to me about before I was famous, because we don't listen to marginalized people. We blame them for their own marginalization. We listen to the privileged. And so that has evolved into me speaking in front of UK Parliament and now speaking in front of the Senate in Boston and, moving to change global policies that I've done at Facebook and Instagram in order to protect minors. And so it's been a long old journey. It's hilarious that people think that I picked up activism as a trend in 2018 because they think I'm actually Tahani from The Good Place and it's a bloody documentary.
Yeah, well, I've known you since much before that, and I can confirm you didn't pick it up then. You were always banging on about this stuff. But then it is 2018 and you post a picture on Instagram and your whole life kind of changes. What do you think it was about that picture and that moment that hit a nerve with so many people?
First, I think it's really important to make sure that we always credit Tarana Burke when it comes to understanding the speed of women's movements now being able to evolve, especially with the use of social media. Me Too set the stage. It set the scene for me to be able to have I Weigh become this viral success. But essentially, it was just because I kept on seeing these images on Instagram of famous women and numbers written across their bodies. And those numbers were not all of the many awards those women had won or their net worth or things that they had contributed to our society or to business. It was just their weight. And these were often pictures of extremely successful businesswomen. So in trying to find the same sort of pictures around men, unless they were a UFC fighter, I could not find a group of men with their weight written across their bodies because we don't care. So I just posted what I weigh, which is my financial independence, my orgasms, my friendships, my activism, my eating disorder that I've overcome. I weigh the sum of all of my parts. And it just hit a nerve because I think post Me Too, women felt less gaslit about how appallingly we have been treated and taught to treat ourselves and each other. And so it just kind of caught like a wildfire across the internet. And I thought it would be a short phase, but we're now 2.5 years later and we're growing 100,000 followers a month and we're at 1.3 million and we have a podcast and a YouTube channel and now becoming a thriving media company just because women are tired. Not just women, because we've also extended to now members of the LGBTQ community, people of all different marginalized groups. Everyone is collectively exhausted by the evil that drives consumerism, materialism, and capitalism. And so we are just trying to educate everyone as best we can about all of these things.
I think it's so interesting that you compare or that you link it to Tarana Burke's Me Too movement, because I think that movement was in many ways about women taking back the autonomy over their own bodies, but it's framed as it should be very much within like sexual violence and what that means to take back autonomy of your body. And I think what you're doing is similarly around ownership and autonomy, but in a very different way, in the way of like how we see ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's also just about sharing our stories. Women in this industry were so much less united pre-Me Too because we just thought we were all individually going through these experiences that no one else was going through. And to realize, oh my God, it's happening to all of us. I think had a similar impact when so many women started to speak out about their eating disorders. And we just saw numbers that we could never have predicted and statistics that were just outrageous that showed us that very few women of our generation and especially the generation after us have got a healthy relationship with food, with their body.
No, it's a very bad situation, but you're making it better. I think a lot of people would sort of post that picture, get some nice comments, share some stories, and then move on with their life. What was it that made you want to turn that post and that idea and that momentum into a company and a movement?
I didn't have a plan. It was just another part of the activism I'd been working on for 14 years. It was just me saying how I feel. And it sort of took on a life of its own, and the Instagram just exploded. And it was just a very clear sign that, oh my God, I finally found the outlet to make this conversation fully mainstream, because we had so much press pickup. I think we had 4 million points of press worldwide within the first 2 months. And so I knew that I would be letting my 19-year-old self down if I didn't take this and just run with it and make sure that we do not let anyone escape this conversation about the evils and malice of Photoshop, of celebrities who are completely irresponsible and just entirely morally bankrupt, and they, do all of these things to their bodies secretly and then attribute it to some laxative powder that they don't even say is a laxative powder. They don't talk about the surgery they have, or the personal trainers they have, or the dietitians or personal chefs, etc. I knew that this was probably the only chance I was ever going to get to be able to just pull down the pants. I'm sorry, pull down the pants of all of the lies that this industry that I love, but inherently is responsible for so much damage. All of the lies that it was telling.
And how, I didn't even write this, but how do you think you managed to resist those lies and traps that the industry you're in so often brings on people?
I don't think I would have had I not been hit by the car.
Yeah.
Teenager. I think that I just was so angry when I came out of that as to how much I'd wasted. I don't remember my teens because I was so hungry. I was so weak. I spent so much of it in bed and just consumed and hating everything about myself. I didn't soak in any experience because I was so busy, like furiously counting calories and trying to burn my calories and exercising all day, every day, which I know is hard for you to imagine because of the person that you know now, but I used to be very exercising. And so I think that, I entered this industry knowing from the start that I wanted to be the role model that I didn't have. And even in my fallibility, even in the mistakes, even in my imperfection, I still consider that something that 12-year-old me needed, to see that people fall and they make mistakes and they get up and they dust themselves off and they do better. So, I've always taken that very seriously. But my God, I asked for years for people to stop photoshopping me because they would ethnically sort of cleanse me. I would just be whitewashed. I would have be given white skin and a new kind of Eurocentric nose. And my lips would be made a little bit smaller in some campaigns because it was pre the big lip craze that's going on now. And they would thin me out and make me look essentially like a white woman who's just wearing a very good bronzer. And so, or not even that good bronzer. And so I was begging for ages, because also it's very hard to live up to an altered image, which is something that I feel very afraid for women nowadays. At least back then, it wasn't as democratized. It was just one sector of women who were, being put through the pressure of living up to this AI image. But now that we have Facetune and all of these different apps, a lot of which are advertised heavily on Facebook and Instagram still. And so I think that that's really important for you guys to take some accountability in what you contribute to the epidemic of eating disorders. And, we have an ongoing relationship about that. But these apps, how is it possible for someone to be able to look in a mirror and feel okay with what they see when they cannot help but compare themselves to this completely flawless, doll-like AI image? And so,
but also it's an AI image of themselves, which I think is the most, the thing that would mess with your brain the most. I already hear my 16-year-old brother talking about the difference between the girls he knows on Instagram and in real life. And the idea that these girls are in competition and sort of trying to change themselves to be another version of themselves is very mad.
Yeah, I really think that huge platforms that are housing the social lives of so many teenagers need to be far more responsible. Like the rise of fasting apps on social media is terrifying. That is such a slippery slope into a full-on eating disorder that can haunt someone for the rest of their life. An eating disorder is never just a phase. It is like a long systemic problem. And so, all I'm trying to do is make sure that as long as I'm allowed to remain in this industry, I use it to just try and clean up all of the mess.
I really want to get into the weeds of your relationship with social media, particularly Instagram. A lot of the work you do, as we've just been talking about, is sort of directly criticizing the ways in which these platforms, either on purpose or not, kind of perpetuate a toxic culture around appearance, body image, and in many ways kind of glorifying the white, cis, straight, thin, able-bodied body. But you also work primarily on these platforms to create change. You've used these platforms for incredible good. I think we both really have experienced and believe in the power of these platforms to make change in a way that hasn't happened before. How have you been able to sort of marry or overcome those contradictions in the way that you work and continue doing the work you do?
I think social media started as such a wonderful idea, and human beings are just amazing at corrupting absolutely everything that is good. But I believe the potential has always still remained there. And without social media, we would not have the mobilization or like the organizing of massive movements like Me Too, like Black Lives Matter, like Trans Lives Matter, and the eating disorder work that I'm doing, or all of the mental health awareness. And so I believe that the good of social media, the potential for good on social media outweighs the bad. All we have to do is just educate young people explicitly about what is bad, what is a lie. And social media platforms need to become more transparent and more responsible with the young people that they are influencing, because they're not learning this stuff at school, they're not learning it at home. So you have to make sure that you are not feeding poison that children do not know how to eliminate from their system. Yeah. So I think that social media has been the most extraordinary part of my activism. I do not think I could have made this much of an impact on whoever I have impacted within my generation without it. And I will just continue to fight to build safe spaces on social media and hope that platforms continue to work with people like you and me and the other wonderful activists that are out there to get back to where we were at the start, which was we were building community.
Yeah, and I think people are still doing it, and I'm completely on the same page as you, and we both, follow only people that are using these platforms incredibly. But yeah, I agree. I sometimes wish there was more of a joining up between the platforms and the people that are using it incredibly. You are one of those examples. At the end of last year, you worked with Instagram to implement a policy, meaning that the platform would restrict any posts promoting weight loss products or cosmetic procedures with an incentive to buy, and so that under 18s can't see them, and remove any content that makes a miraculous claim about a certain diet or weight loss product. What was that process like, and why was that specific policy change so important to you and the iWeigh team?
Well, first of all, I was amazed at how fast Instagram acted. Like, I started a petition, I got maybe 250,000 signatures in the first 3 days. And then I started the petition specifically knowing I had this meeting with Instagram coming up. So I was like, I need something tangible to take in to help me apply pressure. And I took in this petition, and they moved so fast and started to enlist the help of Harvard Strike and NEDA and all these different authorities within the eating disorder world. And it was so important to me because, listen, we all need to be protected from these evils online, people of every and any age. But right now, the people that eating disorders, once they begin, are very, very hard to undo. And it's not in any way that I'm giving up on those who are already suffering. But I do know that preventative care is the best kind for an eating disorder. It's the most effective way. Is that if we can stop the rot before it even starts, then we can save an entire next generation. So I believe the kids are always the priority, because we have the chance to save them from all of the pain that we've been in, and then hopefully move on to helping people who are older. Like when I got the policy change with Instagram and Facebook, there was an outpouring of women over the age of 18 and men and non-binary people saying, God, I wish that this was also the case for me. I wish there was a way for me to ban all of these things that trigger me horribly. I mean, during the pandemic, all of these apps, Twitter including, and TikTok, not just Facebook and Instagram, are all participating in a culture that is massively feeding into the fears of people who are suffering with extra eating disorders during lockdown. And, there's all this pressure from the media and social media of don't gain the COVID-15 or whatever. And you need to get a great lockdown body, which is the new beach body, because we can't go to the beach. So I just think it's so...
Zoom body.
Yeah, exactly. Zoom body is amazing. And so I think it's really, really vital that we start to also listen to those over 18s who are also incredibly vulnerable and impressionable, and recognize that how much money is worth destroying someone's mental health for potentially the rest of their life.
Yeah. And I also think often, because these products and these systems and these diets are so endorsed by the media and different platforms, if you are older, you you almost miss the warning sign that it is just an eating disorder in disguise, because it's sort of really disguised and legitimized by the platform that it's on, which is why all this is extra important.
I was thrilled to see how fast it happened, and I look forward to all future stuff that I want to work on with Facebook. I look forward to working with them because it's the first time around.
It's an amazing thing, and it's so much better, I think, to make the change than just shout about it, which kind of takes us into my next question, which is on more broad corporate responsibility. We've recently seen a really major increase in individuals publicly calling out brands and companies on social media, particularly around the ways that their outward messaging might not line up with their kind of corporate structures or the way that they treat employees or associates. I think there are two ways these scenarios can end up playing out. Sometimes people advocate for a straight out boycott of the brand or company in question, or we've recently seen more examples of activists working with brands, with companies, with corporations to try and create positive change. Can you tell us a bit about your role in the situation between the incredible trans activist Monroe Bergdorf and L'Oreal, and sort of how you feel about that, and what your thoughts are?
Okay, so it's a large story that I will try and condense massively, but essentially in 2017, Monroe became the first ever Black trans woman to become an ambassador for L'Oreal. It was a massive victory for the trans community and got loads of positive press for L'Oreal. And then during her ambassadorship of that year, the Charlottesville incidents happened in the United States. And as a young Black woman and a young Black trans woman, Monroe felt free to, on her private Facebook page, talk about how it made her feel, how unsafe it made her feel, and to talk about white supremacy in a way that we're now always talking about, but 3 years ago it was unheard of. And so someone screen grabbed her private Facebook post, sent it out to the Mail and to the all these different outlets, in particular far right leaning ones, that would of course take that opportunity to call a Black woman a racist for just having called out racism. And so immediately she was dropped by L'Oreal with little discussion, with absolutely no setup or protection afterwards. And it ruined her life. She was sent death threats for 6 months. She became a lightning rod for bigots. And when a very successful, massive corporation turns their back on someone and does not stand by them, it becomes almost like a green light for those who want to harm that person to then completely take them apart because they know that they had no protection. So
especially after, I'm very passionate about this too, but especially after putting her out there to the level that they did and sort of making the situation happen, but by raising her profile.
Exactly, but also hiring her as an activist.
Yeah.
Just as a model, she was there as a voice, as the face of a generation. And so 3 years go by and we have the death of George Floyd, which leads to so many protests around the world. And L'Oreal step up and they say speaking out is worth it, and talk about how much they've donated to charities that are, mobilizing towards helping Black lives. And Monroe just snapped, and it was incredibly brave and incredibly cool, and just reminded the world that when she spoke out, it was absolutely not worth it. And she was dropped and her life was destroyed. And, she could have been horribly harmed. She was sent death threats for months. And so once she did that, I think the entire internet got on board. L'Oreal were not saying anything. They were not saying anything. And I just thought, look, we can either try and cancel L'Oreal, which just isn't a thing because you can't cancel billion-dollar corporations or billionaires. JK. They supersede the power structures that can actually be dismantled.
Which is why there's so many issues with the phrase cancel culture, because most people cannot be cancelled and actually are really affected.
Powerful people can't tell the difference between being called out and cancelled. There is call out culture and then there is cancel culture. To actually be cancelled, you have to be deplatformed, have all of your rights, your money, potentially even your life taken away. So my point being that I just wanted, I know that no one can take down L'Oreal. And I also know that there's a new team of women there who have taken over from a lot of quite toxic men. And I was like, I'm always looking for the end goal. And I worry that sometimes my generation has forgotten to zoom out and look at the macro. And we're just so busy on the initial fight that we don't plan ahead. And I believe in, just hit my funny bone. And I believe in planning ahead. And so I just reached out, via various methods of internal harassment to kind of just burrow my way into the L'Oreal family, and finally got my way to the president of L'Oreal via also applying some public pressure with a very scathing Instagram post. She Zoomed me and was incredibly cooperative. And I asked her if I could get her on a Zoom with Monroe to have this conversation properly, and if we could work out a way to not only apologize, but also make reparation financially, and then work out a way with Monroe to move forward as a company with her help. And I think Monroe at first was a bit reticent because she's lost faith in corporations. But upon having that Zoom, it became very clear that everyone had similar interests. It's a new age for L'Oreal. They do genuinely want to be better. And who better to lead them into a smarter and, more progressive phase than one of the great activists of our time, Monroe Bergdorf. So she's now one of the leading people on their board of diversity. She's been offered reparations, that money has been paid to the charities of her choice, and she has been very much so vindicated publicly in a way that makes me feel extremely proud. And I was very glad to be the bridge through all of that, because as I've always said, I believe in progress, not perfection. These corporations have been vile and evil at times, but they are also a product of a time that allowed that, and we have to make some space for the fact that we hypernormalized abuse of power. So what do we actually gain from turning our backs on the people who have more money and influence than any of us put together? We should get them on our side and use them. And if we look back through history, you'll see that the oppressed have always relied upon the eventual mercy of the oppressor. Yeah. And so we need the oppressor on side. That's a very long answer, but
no, it's amazing. And I think you're amazing. And I think that's, everyone has a different way that they view activism and what needs to happen. But I think that's very much the way that I see things as well. And I think I think there's sometimes this way of people say like, oh, these corporations are using activists to do X. And I actually think there is a way in certain situations to frame it as activists are using these companies to get their message out there and to use their resources. And I think sometimes reframing it in that way is kind of a more powerful, maybe more accurate way of looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so important to just realize that we are all on a journey, and we have to just think about the end goal. Yeah. And, we have to, screaming is vital and necessary, and the pylons are vital and necessary, but that can't be all we do. We need to learn how to organize, not just get lost in chaos of, bashing.
Yeah. That kind of moves me on to like this whole idea of cancel culture, which is a phrase I hate, and personal accountability, which I think is more accurate. You're someone that I have personally watched as a friend sort of change and grow and stand your ground on issues and ideas more than almost anyone I know over the past few years. What does cancel culture mean to you, and because I know you've got strong thoughts on it, and what's your personal thought process on the kind of way you've changed your stance over the years?
Look, I think first of all, it's just all about educating ourselves, right? It's understanding that being piled onto, being criticized, even en masse, even in a way that makes you feel like you're going to have an actual breakdown, is still being called out. Until you are deplatformed and your rights and, for example, finances, etc., jobs are taken away, you have not actually been cancelled. And so I think it's very important to understand the difference, and especially those people in power who know that it's not actually going to shake their world unless they decide for it to. Then
I also think, sorry, I'm just butting in here, but in the cases where a crime has actually been committed, being called out online is not being cancelled, being put in jail is being cancelled, and most of them are not. That does not happen. So,
Roman Polanski not being in jail is one of the most insane incidents of our time.
Yeah.
Sort of a child, and is just still making films, and celebrities still go to his premieres.
And I think he's okay with being cancelled, because the other option is being in prison.
The time. Yeah, it's not real. What it's real for are people who aren't celebrities or who aren't corporations. It's real for them. They actually lose their jobs. They actually don't have a network of people to lift them up and help them rehabilitate past it. I do think that we do have, however, a culture that is toxic, where we call for cancellation where it is not necessarily deserved. We literally call for someone to be entirely removed, deplatformed, like upon their first mistake or an innocent mistake. I do believe that we have lost our ability to identify the difference between ignorance and evil.
Yeah.
So we do call for the act, like practical death. I mean, I remember when I was, supposedly cancelled for the 10,000th time in like February, people were messaging me to kill myself. Like they were actively or begging for all of my jobs to be taken away, etc., just because some rumor had spread about me on the internet that no one had any proof of whatsoever. It was nonsense. And so I do think that we also miss the mark when we do that. We don't call people out with like a proper intention. We just think that we can dismiss all of these different powerful people who, if educated and if corrected, could go on to be great allies of ours. And so I think that is troublesome. It's like, how far along the fight do you think we are that we can just say, no, never mind L'Oreal, we don't need you, or no, never mind this person, that person. I think when someone makes, like someone does irrevocable harm or repeats the same egregious mistakes again and again and again, JK, then I think that is different. And I understand people saying that this person is not actually necessarily helpful with a giant platform. I understand people calling for that, but I just think we should regulate our severity according to the actual crime and start to recognize when someone is evil or when they've just done something bloody stupid because they're a product of their environment.
And I sometimes think because of the way that criticism can now come at individuals en masse in a very intense way, it can actually sort of turn them away from the learning and the educating that they probably did need to do, because the message gets blown up and becomes terrifying. And actually, we should really be working with everyone to educate and inform. And yeah.
Totally. I was also going to say something that I feel like represents like yours and my stance so much, if I can just speak for you for a minute, Scarlett, is that if we don't inherently believe in the possibility of human progress, then what is the point of activism?
Yeah.
What is anyone doing this for if we don't believe in change?
Yeah.
Activism in itself is the act of promoting and engaging in and ensuring change.
And the belief that people can grow.
Yeah, if we don't believe that anything can change, then activism is entirely redundant. So activists who do not engage in actual progress, and obviously it's a case by case basis. Some people just should be gotten rid of and removed from our society. But generally, we have to be very careful that we do not make ourselves redundant. We do not devalue progress entirely.
I also think that you hit the nail on the head, because the thing that frustrates me most when I kind of have a conversation with someone who asks me to explain cancel culture to them, or if I'm pro or against it is case by case. There is no one rule for all of this. And I think we try and reduce things so much. There's such a link between the way people talk about cancel culture now to the way they used to talk about political correctness, which I think political correctness is an incredible thing. And, it's just people asking to be not violated in everyday situations and not hurt and offended. But I think we take it away from the case by case. Sorry, that was a little rant. I also want to talk about your work outside of kind of direct activism. You, as I mentioned in my long intro, are working on a lot of incredible shows. You're producing a lot of incredible shows. You're behind the scenes on a lot of amazing projects. What are the decisions that go around your choices in the film and TV world, and why do you think these projects are still kind of important and have the power to say things?
Oh, because we're just still so not there yet. And, I think until the inside of the, we're starting to become better at what we externally propose as our diversity. Still nowhere near as much disability representation as we need in this world. And so we definitely need to massively step up with that in all forms of media and just generally in our society when it comes to access. But I think that, we've become better at showcasing some diversity on the outside, but there is still so little diversity on the inside. We've been hearing in the last week about, the inside of the UK's television industry and how unbelievably whitewashed and predominantly male and patriarchy soaked that is. So
I can confirm that.
Again?
I can confirm that.
Yes, exactly. But and so I think it's really, really important to have these conversations, but also to then act on it, to not just talk about it, to then make sure that I use my privilege, which very few women of colour in this industry have, to fund my own production company that I've been the sole funder of for the last 2 years, and we've been building all of these different things that we have purely based off the money that I earned from The Good Place. And so that's because I don't want to answer to a man, and I also really want to make sure that nobody even questions my decision to hire predominantly women. If I feel like it, if they are the most qualified for the job, and if I choose to take on people who have not got maybe the experience that a white male straight counterpart would have, or able-bodied counterpart might have, I've made it my decision to make sure that I build us from the inside out a diverse and welcoming space. And I want to create radically inclusive content. And I've just started creating small interview shows where activists, young marginalized activists, interview guests of their choice, where I'm no longer in the show. I'm no longer the star of the show. I'm not there. I'm behind the scenes just producing them. And I just think it's really important that those of us with power and privilege and platforms utilize that to share our space. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Who knows how it'll go, but I just know that, it's a very sausage heavy world, the world of not just within this industry, but also just the world of business in its totality. And I do think that there has been some correlation between Me Too and women finally calling out sexually abusive and inappropriate environments, and men no longer hiring women, even as little as they already had been. We have seen numbers literally decline because I think they're just like, oh no, well, I can't hire a woman because I don't want her to falsely accuse me of rape, which happens less than like maybe 2% of the time.
Accidentally fall on her. I also think we've got to wrap up soon, but I also think we need to change what we mean by qualified for the job. If you're making a show about a woman working on that show is going to be more qualified for the job because she's a woman. Never mind what experience she has. You have.
But also, where are we going to start with that experience? We have to start somewhere.
I hate that phrase, qualify for the job. Okay, we've got to wrap up. I have one more question. Everyone listening to this is probably in some ways connected to the tech world. What advice would you give to someone working in this field who wants to create change?
I would say do not seek approval, because the two things are mutually exclusive. Right? You cannot seek approval and mass popularity if you are also trying to do something that is even vaguely abrasive. If you are challenging a system of oppression, you have to remember that equality to the privileged feels like oppression. So people feel like you are taking something away from them in order to give to others, and often they do not like it. And so I think it's very, very important to put that aside. I have put my desire to make extra friends or have popularity or be approved or seen to be always easy and pleasing in order to make systemic and proper change. The right people will stand with you. The people who stand against you, you do not need their praise and acceptance. They are not on your side, and their opinion does not matter. Change matters.
I'm nodding so much. I look like a nodding doll. You're amazing. I could, as you know, talk to you forever. I'm sure everyone could listen to you forever. But that is the end of our session. And I am going to hand back to Laura to say goodbye.
Well, I've got one more thing to say. Sorry. Also, make space for other women.
Yes.
Make space for other women when you get in. Make sure that there's allowed to be more than one of you in the room. That's a lie.
Lift people up.
There's more safety for us in numbers. That's it.
Yeah.
Definitely. I saw something the other day where they said, bring a folding chair for other women if you need to. So thank you. Goodness.
Chair, not just a folding chair.
Any kind of chair. Bring a throne. Thank you so much to you both for just such an incredibly inspiring session. I think I spent the whole of it with goosebumps. And there's just so much that we can all take on how to drive change as an individual, and how to go for progress, not perfection, and stop seeking approval. So thank you. And for everyone listening in, please stick around for our next session, which is on redefining workplaces and technology with well-being first, and how we're going to change things going forward. Thank you all.
Bye.